All right, welcome back, everyone. We're doing a deep dive today into Tesla's Q4 2024 earnings report. We've got a few things to look at. We've got, of course, their official report. We've got the transcript from the earnings call with Elon. And we've got an interesting analysis from the Motley Fool.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there.
There is. And the thing that jumps out to me is we've got record revenue, but profits are down. So are we worried? Or is this just, part of the master plan?
Well, I think it's important to remember that Tesla's playing a bit of a different game than a lot of other companies out there, right? I mean, they're really focused on the long term. But to understand that, we kind of have to break down the numbers a little bit. So, yeah, it's a mixed bag for sure. But I think if we look at their short-term performance alongside their long-term goals, it'll start to make a little more sense.
Okay, so let's get into those numbers.
Yeah.
So revenue hit $25.7 billion, which is a 2% increase year over year.
That sounds pretty
That's good.
Yeah, no, that's impressive, especially when you consider the price cuts they made and the overall economic climate. And the revenue is being driven by a few key things. They had strong vehicle deliveries, their energy business is growing, and regulatory credits are still playing a role. But the market wasn't exactly thrilled.
Really? Why not?
Well, Wall Street, those analysts, they were expecting revenue to be closer to $27.1 billion.
So that's why we saw that initial dip in the stock price. Investors, they don't like it when expectations aren't met, even if the numbers themselves look pretty good.
Yeah, the market can be fickle like that. But it's not just about missing revenue targets, it's the shrinking profit margins that have people concerned.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Let's talk about that.
So operating income, it took a pretty big hit, down 23% year over year, which resulted in a 6.2% operating margin. It's significantly lower than what we've seen in previous quarters.
Well, why is that a big deal? I mean, 6.2% still, and it sounds okay to me.
Sure, but you have to think of it like this. For every $100 Tesla brings in, they're only keeping about $6 in profit. And that kind of decline, well, that can make investors a little nervous, especially if it becomes a trend.
That makes sense. Lower profit margins, that means less money to reinvest in the business. And we know Tesla's got a lot of ambitious projects in the works, like production and deliveries. I mean, they absolutely crushed it in that area.
Oh, they did. I mean, just look at the numbers. Almost 459,000 vehicles produced, over 495,000 delivered. Those are both quarterly records. But there's a twist.
Okay, I like a good twist. What is it?
2024 actually saw the first yearly drop in delivery since way back in 2011.
Wow, seriously. That's a pretty big deal considering how much Tesla has been focused on growth. What's behind that?
Well, competition is definitely heating up, especially from companies like BYD, especially in the Chinese market.
Yeah, the EV market is getting a lot more crowded, isn't it? Tesla's not the only player anymore.
Exactly, and that's putting pressure on them to compete on price, which is, one of the reasons for those price cuts we talked about.
Right, but competition can't be the whole story, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be other things affecting their profitability, too.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Those price cuts, especially on the Model 3 and Y, those are their bread and butter, Those price cuts, those are definitely eating into profits. You lower the price to attract more buyers, but if your production costs stay the same,
you're making less money on each car you sell.
Yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, you've got the massive investment they're pouring into AI and autonomous driving, the R&D. Elon's betting big on this being the future.
Yeah, and those aren't cheap bets to make.
Not at all. Developing cutting-edge tech like full self-driving, and let's not forget Optimus, their humanoid robot, it's incredibly expensive.
Optimus. Yeah, he said they'd be using thousands of those in their factories this year, right? Can you even picture that?
It's a little hard to wrap your head around, right?
Yeah.
Think of it this way. It's not about replacing human workers entirely, at least not yet. It's more about having them do the jobs that people don't want to do. The repetitive tasks, the dangerous stuff, loading parts, moving materials, all of that.
So like optimizing efficiency, maybe even dealing with those labor shortages.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about revenue, profit margins, and some of those big investments that are happening. What about those regulatory credits? They brought in a decent chunk of change there, didn't they?
Yeah, regulatory credits brought in $692 million in Q4. That's a nice boost. But it's important to remember what those are, how they work. It's basically governments giving these credits to automakers for selling electric vehicles.
Right. It's to incentivize cleaner transportation.
Exactly. So other car companies that maybe aren't as far along with their EV programs, they can buy these credits from Tesla to meet those government requirements.
So it's been a good revenue stream for Tesla.
For sure. But it's not something they can rely on forever.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, what happens if those regulations change? Or, other automakers catch up and they don't need to buy credits anymore.
Yeah, then that revenue would dry up pretty quickly.
It could, so it's a risk.
Okay, so just to sum it up, we've got record revenue, which is great, but shrinking profit margins, partly due to those price cuts, partly due to those increased operating expenses, investing in those big projects. And then there's that whole uncertainty around those regulatory credits. It's kind of complicated, isn't it?
It is. There's a lot going on. And then on top of all of that, Elon's vision for the future, it's about way more than just selling cars. He sees Tesla as a tech company, an energy company, and maybe even a major player in robotics. It's pretty wild.
I love it. Okay, so we gotta dig into those long-term plans a little bit more. I'm especially interested in this whole full self-driving thing. Didn't Elon say something about an unsupervised version launching in Austin this year?
He did.
That seems like a pretty big step, doesn't it?
It is a big step. It's a perfect example of how Tesla is, really willing to bet big on these technologies that haven't been fully proven yet. It's risky, but the payoff could be huge.
All right, well, we've got a lot more to talk about, so stay tuned and we'll be right back.
Sounds good. All right, so welcome back. I think we left off talking about full self-driving, and I think that's where it gets really interesting. Elon's claiming that they're on track for a truly unsupervised FSD to be a paid service as early as June of this year in Austin, and they're already testing it out, with Teslas driving themselves around their Fremont factory.
Okay, hold on. I know we've talked about FSD on this show before, but can you break that down a little? What does unsupervised actually mean here? Is it like those self-driving taxis we hear about all the time?
It's a big step toward that, yeah. So basically it means the car is making, all the driving decisions itself with zero human intervention. You can think of it this way. Like right now, FSD it's more like a super advanced driver assistance system. It helps you out with lane keeping and adaptive cruise control, but you've got to be ready to take over at any time. But this unsupervised FSD, that's different. It's trying to take the human out of the loop entirely, at least in certain areas,
So is this like a robo-taxi, but you still own the car?
That's a good way to put it.
And they're doing this in Austin already. That's crazy to me. What if something goes wrong?
Well, yeah, that's the big question, right? And that's what regulators are going to be really, really looking at closely. Tesla is saying that their tech is good enough now that it can handle, driving in the real world even without a person behind the wheel.
It's a bold move, that's for sure. And if they pull it off, I mean, wow, that could really change transportation, change everything, right? But this is Elon we're talking about here, right? He's famous for making these big promises. Is this just hype?
Well, I mean, there's always that chance, but they have been making progress. I mean, they've got millions of miles of driving data to train their systems on, and they're not the only ones working on this. You've got Waymo, you've got Cruise, a bunch of others. There's a real race going on to see who gets that truly driverless car on the market first.
And how are the other car companies reacting to all this? I mean, is Tesla, are they still the king of the EV market?
Well, they were the pioneers for sure, but the landscape's changing. It's changing fast. I mean, you've got those traditional car companies, those giants, Volkswagen, Ford, GM. They're all investing heavily in their EV lineups now. And then you've got all those startups popping up too. Rivian, Lucid Motors, they're all trying to find their place. So yeah, the competition is definitely getting fierce.
So can they stay on top as the market gets more and more crowded?
It's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, they have a strong brand. They've got loyal customers, and they've definitely got a head start when it comes to the tech and the charging infrastructure. But they can't just sit back and relax. They've got to keep pushing, keep innovating, and deliver on those big promises if they want to stay ahead of the game.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how Tesla is really positioning themselves as more than just a car company, isn't it? I mean, they're into energy. They're pushing those limits with AI and robotics. It's like they're trying to create like their own world almost.
Yeah, it's like they're selling a vision of the future, not just cars. It's electric, it's autonomous, and it's all tied into renewable energy. And don't forget, they've got Elon Musk. He's really good at getting people excited about those big ideas.
You mentioned energy. What's happening there? I think they said something in the report about their Megapack and Powerwall products.
They did, yeah. They had record deployments for both of those in Q4. So yeah, that's good news for that part of their business. I mean, this isn't just some side project for them, you know.
Yeah.
It's a core part of that vision we were talking about. You know, they want a world where electric cars run on clean energy and where those cars can actually send power back to the grid when they're not being used.
So like a whole cycle, right? Like you drive your Tesla, which is powered by solar, and then when you're not using it, it's powering your house or even the grid. That's pretty amazing if they can pull it off.
That's the idea. And it really fits well with this whole, you know, global push for sustainability and clean energy. Tesla's they're really, really well positioned to be, you know, a major player in that.
Okay, so we've got the EVs, self-driving tech, the energy storage. Anything else we should be keeping an eye on?
There was a quick mention of the Tesla Semi in the earnings call, you know, their electric semi truck.
All
Sounds
right.
like they're getting ready to ramp up production on that later this year. Deliveries should start in early 2026.
Oh yeah, the semi. I almost forgot about that. It feels like they've been talking about it forever, hasn't it? But if they can actually get it, onto the roads in big numbers, that could really shake up the trucking industry.
Yeah, no doubt. It's another example of how they're not just aiming at, you know, individual car buyers. They're thinking bigger. They're going after whole industries.
I'm still waiting for the Cybertruck though. Yeah, I want to see that on the road. Any updates there?
Not much in the call, unfortunately.
Okay, but okay, speaking of getting people excited, we've got to talk about Elon's prediction about Tesla's value, right? He said he thinks they could be worth more than like the next five biggest companies combined. I mean, that's a pretty wild thing to say.
It is, but it shows how confident he is, right? Especially in AI and robotics, he really believes they can, you know, disrupt multiple industries,
Yeah.
create trillions of dollars in value.
It's one thing to say it though, right? It's another to actually do it. So what do they have to do to make that happen? What are the biggest challenges for them?
Well, they've got to execute on those plans for one. You know, ramp up that Optimus production, make sure those robots actually work, deliver on those driverless cars, and they've got to deal with all the competition in the EV and energy market.
And they got to do all of that while still making money, right? Keep those investors happy.
Yeah, it's a lot to juggle. And it's worth remembering that Tesla, they do have a bit of a history of overpromising. They've missed deadlines before, they've had production issues and you know, their share of controversy. So while the vision is exciting, I think, you know, a little bit of skepticism is probably a good idea.
That's a good point. But even if they don't, achieve everything, you can't deny that they're a company that really pushes the limits. They make you think about the future differently.
Absolutely, and that's what makes them, you know, so fascinating. They're not just trying to make, you know, small improvements here and there. That they're trying to change the world.
Okay, so we've talked about the financials,
Mm.
FSD, the competition, the energy business, and Elon's big vision.
Hmm.
What's the most important thing for our listeners to remember here?
I think it's that, you know, they're at a crossroads. They've got some real challenges, but they're also going after these opportunities that could really, really change entire industries. This is going to be a big year for them.
I totally agree. So going back to that question from the beginning, should we be worried about these declining profit margins?
Well, it's definitely something to watch, to keep an eye on. But Tesla's, you know, they're not playing by the same rules as everyone else. They're not obsessed with those short-term profits. They're investing for the long term, even if it means, you know, taking a hit right now.
It's risky, but it could pay off big.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what makes it so interesting to follow, right? I mean, it's not just about the quarterly numbers. It's about this potential for really massive change.
All right, before we finish up here, there's one more thing I wanted to mention. Remember Elon saying they're going to have, thousands of those Optimus robots in their factories this year.
Yeah.
Well, he also talked about what they're actually going to be doing.
Oh, right. Yeah. Loading parts, moving stuff around, you know, basically doing those boring jobs.
Right. But if those robots can actually do those jobs, I mean, even if they seem kind of boring, that's a huge step, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all about showing they can actually be reliable, right? If they can work with with the human workers without causing, any problems, then that opens up so many possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, imagine robots doing those dangerous jobs,
Yeah.
performing surgeries, even exploring space. It's pretty mind-blowing to think about.
But let's not get carried away. There's a long way to go before those robots are,
Oh,
everywhere.
for sure, for sure. But it's exciting to think about, and that's what I love about Tesla. They're not afraid to dream big.
And they're not afraid to go after those dreams even if they seem impossible.
And that's what makes them so different. It's not just about making small improvements. It's about making a real difference.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, I think we've covered just about everything here, but before we go, there's one last thought I want to leave our listeners with. Remember how Musk said that he thinks all transportation, all of it, will eventually be electric and autonomous.
Yeah, he compared it to the combustion engine, right?
Right.
Like it's just gonna happen.
Exactly. It's a big statement, and people might disagree with it, but it shows just how transformative these technologies could be. I mean, imagine a world with fewer accidents, less pollution, and transportation that's just more efficient. It's a pretty inspiring vision, isn't it?
It is.
It's a little bit scary too, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And Tesla's right there, right there in the middle of it all, trying to make it happen.
Yeah, it really gets you thinking, doesn't it? About a world where, cars are driving themselves, where accidents are rare and transportation's running on clean energy. I mean, it almost sounds like science fiction.
It does, it does. But here we are watching it, happen right in front of us.
Yeah.
And Tesla's they're leading the way. They're not just making cars. They're building the future. And they're not afraid to make those bold predictions either. Like when Elon compared switching to electric and autonomous vehicles to the rise of the combustion engine. Like he's basically saying it's going to happen no matter what.
It's a powerful analogy, and it really shows how ambitious they are. They're not just trying to sell more cars than the other guy. They're trying to change the world, and whether they succeed completely or not, they're pushing the whole industry forward.
But let's be real, right? There were still a lot of obstacles to overcome before we get to that world where everything's electric and autonomous. What do you see as the biggest challenges?
Well, the technology itself, that's just one part of it, right? I mean, think about the infrastructure, all the charging stations we'd need for millions and millions of electric cars. That's going to take a lot of investment from both companies and governments.
And then you've got the whole regulatory side of things. Governments are still trying to figure out how to regulate these self-driving cars, how to make sure they're safe, and what to do about all the jobs that might be lost because of automation. It's complicated, and it's going to take time.
Yeah, no doubt. And then you've got those social and ethical questions too, right? Like how do we make sure everyone has access to these technologies? How do we protect people's privacy, and how do we prepare for a world where where robots are more and more a part of our lives? These are big questions that we need to start talking about now.
You've got some really good points there. It's easy to get caught up in all the excitement of new technology, but we do need to think about those downsides too. We need to have those conversations and make sure we're shaping the future, in a way that works for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. Technology, it's a powerful tool, but we're the ones who decide how to use it.
Yeah.
And we need to be aware of the consequences, both good and bad.
Well said. Well said. So we've done our deep dive into Tesla's earnings and their plans for the future. What's the one thing you want our listeners to really think about?
For me, it's that Tesla's not just a company. It's like a catalyst. They're pushing us toward a future that's both exciting and a little bit uncertain. And their story, it shows us that innovation, it's not always a smooth ride.
Yeah.
It's messy, it's unpredictable, and it's definitely risky. But that's where the big breakthroughs happen.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's not just about the numbers. It's about understanding that bigger picture, the things that are shaping the future.
And it's about being a part of that, asking those tough questions and making good decisions about the kind of world we want to live in.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. All right, that's all for this episode. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.